Hi everyone, this is audap. Let's continue our game of Chaos Head Noah running on Nintendo Switch. Which one are we at? 1022, 1025, 1026. As he passed by me, he put his hand on my shoulder. He let out an annoyed sigh and left the room. Don't leave me alone with her. Ayase seemed completely uninterested in Misumi's sudden departure, as if he didn't even notice at all. It was as if he'd never been in the room to begin with. She was always like that, always above everything that was going on around her. It was like she saw something different than everyone else.
君が生み出したんでしょ。あの時の花壇。それで悟ったの。君はすでに目覚めていると。
僕はギガロマニアックスじゃないよ。
ギガロ何？
ギガロマニアックスでしょ。青いセナから聞いた。
青いセナ。そう。彼女ね。一度だけ会ったことがあるわ。グラジオールの黒騎士よ。彼女も。
Black Knight of Gladiel? Giglomaniac? Did the words mean the same thing?
とにかく僕は違うんだ。リソードだって結局手に入れられなかった。
神罰を乗り越えて、そうすれば剣は召喚される。
神罰？
苦しみ、心的負荷の爆発、心の扉の向こう側、あるいは精神的拷問。言い方はいろいろ。
僕、これまでにもたくさん苦しんできたよ。
Even now I was suffering. The whole country was laughing at me. The police thought I was a killer. Shogun and Yua were threatening me. And then there was Nanami.
私は精神病院にいたわ。子供の頃の話。
I knew about that. I'd read about it online. But why was she talking about this to me? But why was she talking to me about this?
そこには5年弱いた。私の心はとても弱くて。だから攻撃した。周囲にあるものすべてを。同時に自分のことも。
Ayase began to speak slowly, like a whisper. Sitting there in her pastel pajamas, fingers running along the creases in the sheets. There was no trace of the strength I'd seen at her concert. Was the fess I'd seen even real?
私はよく窓ガラスを割っていたの。問題児ね。
There was a small smile on her lips.
割れたガラスの破片。そこにいつもぼんやりと見えていた。
何が？
剣が。でも何年もそれが何なのかわからなかった。ようやくそれがディソードだと知ったのは施設に入って4年ほど経った頃。それまで私は好き放題やっていたけど、ある日施設の職員が一斉に入れ替わって、私は何ヶ月もいろいろな拷問をされて、心が壊れてしまう間際に大いなる意志の声が聞こえて、やっと召喚できたのよ。
拷問って？
それが神罰だった。 邪神を打ち破る力を手に入れるには、純粋なる邪神が必要。
Did that mean she was telling me to suffer more? That if I didn't, I wouldn't get the sword? If so, then I'd rather just forget the whole thing. I didn't want to suffer. I'd already been through so much. Just leave me alone. I put my hands up to my head, suddenly feeling an urge to scream as loud as I could. But Ayase's voice wouldn't let me in, or wouldn't let me.
すべてはお告げよ。すでに渋谷に集っているはずなの。7人の黒騎士は。あとは全員が覚醒するだけ。急がないと世界は滅びるわ。グラジオールの手によって。
Misumi and I both looked at each other and shrugged as we walked down the first floor to the first floor.
俺、もう岸本のことはどうでもよくなった。これまでの俺のポリシーはな、タク。可愛ければ何でも許してやるだった。けどそりゃ間違ってたよ。あんな強烈なテンパ、俺には受け止めらんねえよ。素直に梢ちゃんだけ狙うことにするぜ。
I wasn't sure that was a good idea either. Misumi already had a girlfriend after all.
お前、マジですごいな。岸本のあの脳みそお花畑の話、よく30分近くも聞いてられるよ。俺尊敬したぜ。俺は3分も持たなかった。この俺がだぞ。
Okay. I kept an eye on my surroundings as I walked, only occasionally responding to some comment Misumi made. When we got to the outpatient building lobby, I could see Rimi standing there, looking a little spaced out. Cold wind was rustling through her hair, and I could see she lacked her usual cheerful demeanor. She was looking up at the night sky as if some big problem was on her mind.
おーい、リミ。
When Misumi said her name, she turned to us with a sudden bright smile on her face and waved energetically at us.
やっと見つかった。
Seeing her smile made me feel relieved. I found myself running up to her. Of course, I couldn't hug her or anything like that, so running up to her was all I did.
タク、感動の再会だね。また会えて嬉しい。
どこほっつき歩いてたんだ？
病室、どこかわからなくて、あちこちさまよっちゃった。ひどいよ。置いてくなんて。
She gave us a show of fake crying.
お前が先に行けって言ったんだろ。
そうだったね。で、岸本さんには会えた？
I nodded. Misumi was behind me, but I could tell he was grinning.
お前、岸本にビンタされてただろ。
さて、何のことでしょう。
Evidently, Rimi had wanted to keep the fact that Ayase had slapped her a secret. I hadn't intended to bring it up. Misumi read the room.
隠そうったって無駄だぜ。俺は一部始終を見てたんだ。某家政婦のようにな。
なんだ、バレてたのか。
She gave us an awkward look and then stared up into my eyes.
もしかして、タクも見てたの？
そうだ。俺とタクで決定的瞬間をバッチリ見てた。
Don't tell her that.
なんだ、それじゃあ必死にごまかそうとしてたのがバカみたいじゃない。屋上に行ったらちょうど岸本さんがいたから、つい気になってたことを質問しちゃったの。そしたら機嫌損ねたみたい。
A question.
なんだよ。気になってたことって。
ね、剣を見せてって。
Did that mean Remy could see the D swords too? I thought so for a moment, but I was wrong.
ほら、タクが前に剣のこと話してたでしょ。だから、私も見たいなーって。
それで引っ叩かれたのか？意味わからん。岸本って剣の話ばっかしてるのにな。さっきも病室に入った途端グラディエーターがどうとか言い出してマジビビったぜ。
The three of us walked side by side through the outpatient lobby. This part of the hospital had evidently closed for the day because there were only a few people there. There were, however, around 10 people gathered around the big LCD TV in the corner.
何かな？
また新しいニュージェネでも起きたんじゃね？
Misumi whispered. I froze, but Remy... She quietly gripped my hand. The warm feeling kept me from being any more scared. I could feel the tension in my heart melt away. Remy was my support. Remy gave me safety. Remy would stay with me. Maybe I was being a little too optimistic, but having her by my side kept the terror just barely manageable. I was so glad she was here.
なあ、二人とも来てみろよ。
Misumi had gone over to the TV and was beckoning the two of us. The others, patients young and old, and even the nurses, were all glued to the screen. What was going on?
行ってみよう。
Remy pulled me by the hand until we were close enough to see the TV. Nervously, I looked at it, and when I saw the text on the screen, when I saw what the text on the screen said, I was stunned. It was news about the arrest of the NewGen killer.
繰り返しお伝えします。今日午後3時半ごろ、警視庁渋谷署はいわゆるニュージェネレーションの凶器と呼ばれる渋谷で発生した一連の殺人事件のうち、9月29日に起きた通称貼り付け殺人事件の容疑者を逮捕しました。殺人容疑で逮捕されたのは無職狛枝慎吾容疑者25歳です。容疑については先ほど渋谷署で行われた記者会見の通り、今のところ太田久さん殺害についてのみで、他の事件に関する容疑は今後追及していく構えです。狛枝容疑者は太田さん殺害については容疑を認めており、
No, hold on a minute. Okay, just had to make some tea. Since we're doing so much talking.
交際している女性が太田さんにしつこくつけ回され、カッとなって首を絞めた。しかしゾンビだったため死なず、貼り付けにして動きを止めたなどと意味不明の供述をしています。警察の調べでは、駒枝容疑者には現在交際している女性がいないことが明らかになっており、薬物を摂取していた疑いもあるとみて捜査を進めています。
I couldn't believe it. The TV was showing recorded footage of the suspect being taken away by car. There were media everywhere, the light from their camera bulbs making the screen flash. There was a jacket over the man's head. I couldn't see what he looked like at all.
タク、
Rimi's hand gripped mine tighter. She whispered to me as she looked at the screen.
やっぱりタクは犯人なんかじゃなかったし、将軍っていう人も単なるいたずらだったんだよ。楠木さんだって間違った推理をしてただけ。ね、これで何もかも解決。もう見えない影なんかに怯えることないんだよ。
That's right. If they'd arrested somebody else for the crucified murder, then that meant I couldn't have been the one to do it. I wasn't a sleepwalker. I didn't have multiple personalities. This proved I was completely normal. And at the same time, it proved that I hadn't seen Rimi covered in blood there either. It hadn't been real. It had just been a delusion of mine. It was over. The nightmare I'd been dealing with for the past month was over. I didn't need to be jumping at shadows anymore. I didn't need to be scared of the gaze of God. I didn't need to be frantically looking for the D-sword. I didn't need to do any of that. So why? Why did something feel so wrong? The idea that Shogun had just been stalking me as some kind of prank didn't seem credible. Maybe I only thought that way because my sense of what was normal had been numbed for the past month. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I couldn't set it on vibrate like it was supposed to, but I still couldn't take a phone call in a hospital. I let go of Rimi's hand and headed out the front door. I answered the phone.
はい。誰？
I tensed up. Maybe it was the Turiyanse song again. I checked the name on the phone, but it was unlisted. I got a bad feeling and went to hang up, but the voice on the other end was in terrible pain, but it was, without a doubt, Nanami's voice.
ナミ。
何なの？右手を返して。
The Ghetto Froggy specialty shop was called Totally Froggy. Someone at some point must have thought it was a funny pun, but all it could elicit from Bon was a tired sigh. There were 20 Totally Froggy stores all across the city, and they were supposedly building more. The one in Harajuku was the first one that had been built, and so it was a mecca for Ghetto Froggy fans. That was the one Bon decided to visit, and he was quickly regretting it.
なあ、ゆあちゃん。帰っていいか?
He whispered to Yua, who'd accompanied him to the store and shown him where it was.
でも、百瀬さんからゲロカエルを買ってくるように頼まれてるんじゃ。
だってよ、おじさんだけ明らかに浮いてるからさ。
It was right on Tekshita Street, and there were countless young people walking outside, having fun and talking to each other. Most of them were completely ignoring the shop. The inside was small and mostly devoid of people. There were only about 5 people there, including Bon and Yua, and all of them, but Bon, were teenage girls. A guy that looked like Bon walking down Takeshita Street with a teenage girl like Yua probably seemed like he was buying sex. And now here he was, buying her the mascot character that all the kids loved. What a perfectly stereotypical old pervert he was. Bon felt depressed. And?
なんか誰かに見られてるような気がするんだよな。 いい年して自意識過剰かもしんねえが。
あ、それ、私もです。最近、誰かの視線を感じて、たまに、すごく、怖くなるんですよ。
なんで俺だけじゃなかったか。ゆあちゃんの場合は心配だな。ストーカーに付け狙われてたりしたら。
そんな、怖いこと言わないでください。
安心しな。そんな奴がいたら俺が逮捕してやるから。
Bond grinned, then turned to look at the Ghetto Froggy items on the shelf.
ところで、ゆあちゃんはここに来るのは何度目だ。
私も、初めてです。
あんまり客がいねえようだが。静かなブームってやつなのか。
金曜日から日曜日にかけては、すごく混んでるらしいです。あ、つまり新作が発売されて、週末の間だけですね。特に金曜日は、ものすごく並ぶらしくて、学生のために18時に販売開始なんですけど、噂だと、その行列だけで竹下通りが埋め尽くされる、とか。
週末だけね。ますます怪しいな。
Bond decided to grab 2 of the last week's frogs, teary-eyed Geru Froggy, and take them to the register. Yua seemed to have decided not to buy any for herself. She simply followed him behind him.
射精
The clerk was a rather dim-looking 20-something man with his hair dyed green. He even had pierced ears. If he wasn't at the register, it would have been hard to believe he worked in a store. He certainly didn't seem like the customer service type. The clerk was openly gawking at Yua and Bon.
娘さんへのプレゼントってやつっすか。
そうなんだよね。この子がどうしてもって言うから。まあ、たまには父親らしいことしてやらんとね。
Bond gave the clerk a friendly, awkward-looking grin. Yua had a surprised look on her face and quickly turned her head down, but Bond ignored her and continued to play the role of Dad.
それより、このカエルに興味あるんだけど、ちょっと話聞かせてもらっていいかな。ゲコカエルンってそんなに人気あるの？
っていうかゲロカエルんすよ。バンバン人気あってやばいっす。
ゲプカエルンね。いつも週末に新作が出るんでしょ。
ゲロカエルんだって言ってんじゃんマジで。っていうか新作とかそういう言い方マジやめてよ。新ガエルだから。金土日と超並んでバンバン売れるんでマジやばいっすよ。マジでバンバン売れるっすから。バンバンっすよマジで。
Yua suddenly narrowed her eyes. Something in the way he was saying bang so many times felt strange. Why did he keep emphasizing it? It probably wasn't deliberate, but it felt like he was using it as an excuse to say Bond's name over and over again. But in a really rude way, too.
これ、メイドインチャイナってラベルに書いてあるだけなんだけど、メーカーとかわかる？
は？メーカー？つうかゲロカエルにブランドとかねえし、ゲロカエルンはゲロカエルンじゃね？それで完結してね？おっさん待ち受けんだけど。教えとくと、ゲロカエルンって作ってんじゃねえから。マジバンバン生まれてっから。
Bond felt like was about to bang his fist into the clerk's face if the conversation continued any longer. He paid and left the store.
店員の教育がなってねえな。今時の若い連中ときたらもうろくに会話もできやしねえ。大体なんだあの格好はもう。
そうですね。あ。
Suddenly, Yua stopped. She grabbed onto Bond's jacket to bring him to a halt as well.
見てください、バンさん。
どうした？
Yua pointed towards a parked truck. Several cardboard boxes were being unloaded from it at that very moment. They were being carried into the back of the Ghetto Froggy shop.
明日発売になるゲジカエルンの新作か。
ゲロカエルンです。
ゆあちゃん、よく見つけたな。偉いぞ。
いえ、そんな。
Normally the truck would have had a company name on it, but it was completely painted white. The boxes, however, had a picture of Ghetto Froggy and the name of a company on them.
NewGen 会社新興。聞いたことあるかい？
ありません。
となれば困った時のももちゃん頼みだな。
Misumi and I parted ways at the station, and I headed back to the base. The whole time, it felt like I was wandering in a nightmare. I kept seeing Nanami's face flickering in and out of my mind, a different expression on it each time. Nanami was the type whose feelings always showed on her face. When she was mad, she'd puff out her cheeks. When she was happy, she'd grin so much it made you embarrassed to look at her. All those expressions in my memories came back to me, one by one. It made me feel sick. Was that call? What had Nanami meant? Was the bandage I'd seen on her arm at school... Where was she now? At school? Or had she gone home?
Taku, ほら、前見て歩かないと転んじゃうよ。
With Rimi's help, I made it up to the roof.
どうしたの？
これから実家に帰ってみようと思うんだ。
これから急だね。
歩いても30分もかからないところなんだ。それで一緒についてきてほしい。
I felt so nervous as I asked her that I thought my heart would burst out of my chest. I was a little surprised that I was able to get the words out. I'd never been able to ask anyone for anything before.
それって。
Rimi seemed lost in thought.
もしかしてご両親に紹介するみたいな流れ？
は？
Rimi said something so ridiculous my mouth fell open.
だとしたら心の準備がまだ。
違う。そうじゃなくて。
And suddenly, a high-pitched sound stabbed my ears. It was like a girl's scream. The wind blew hard. The air shook around me. A crimson light blinded me. I turned towards the source of the light, unsure of what was going on. There, on top of the shipping crate, I looked up. And saw Senna Aoi holding her D-sword in her hand. The light was coming from the flashing D-sword, but something was strange. The last time I saw it, Senna's D-sword had been flashing with a blue light. The sound quickly disappeared. The wind stopped.
答える。
Her voice was sharp. Her gaze was cold. I could see murder in her eyes.
これを書いたのはお前か？
She was holding the essay with the IR2 equation scribbled on the back. It was all wrinkled, like someone had crumpled it up. Why would Senna have that? Why would she even be here? The words breaking and entering came into my mind, and I realized that she'd been in my room. But why?
答えろと言っている。
そうだけど。だから。
Now it was Kozupi's voice. She was behind Senna's back. She was clinging to Senna's leg and poking her head out at me. Her expression was incredibly tense. Just as Kozupi shouted, Senna jumped. She raised the sword. Rimi yanked me hard and I fell backwards. I looked up at the place where I'd just been standing. Senna's sword had torn a chunk out of the ground. Its sharpness and destructive power were almost unreal. The impact had been enough to shatter concrete, but the blade was unharmed. I thought the D-swords were supposed to be invisible, and you couldn't even touch them. Then I remembered what I'd heard before. The sword must have been real booted. The four of us here had a shared awareness of Senna's D-sword. It wasn't a delusion anymore. It was real. It was a huge sword with the power to cut someone in half. If Remy hadn't pulled me back, the beautiful blade would have sliced into me, head first, and I'd have died instantly. My whole body started to shake. Senna had just tried to kill me. Why? My mind was filled with questions. Not too long ago, she, Kozupi, and I had all been eating Garugadi-kun popsicles together. We certainly weren't close enough that I could call her a friend, but she still scared me. But it certainly didn't feel like she was going to attack me on sight with a D-sword.
殺してやる。
Senna looked up, glaring at me. She moved fast. Even though she was carrying that huge weapon, she got into a crouch like a sprinter at the starting line and began to run. The tip of the blade tore into the ground as she got closer and closer, and when she was close enough, she raised it high above her head. My instincts told me in an instant what was going on. She was serious. Senna was serious. I was lying on the ground, staring up, helpless and pathetic. I screamed. I couldn't escape. This was just so unfair. So sudden. How could it suddenly be game over like this? All that time I'd spent running away from Shogun, and now I die to a surprise attack from Senna? No, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And then, someone leapt between us, standing between me and Senna. I realized it was Remy. She was standing between me and Senna, with her arms spread out wide to block her path. Was she putting herself in danger to protect me?
どけ。
But Remy, you'll die. I don't want that.
先畑さんには気をつけて。
Suddenly, I remembered what Kozupi had said before. Pale light began to pour out from between Remy's spread arms.
先畑さんはよくわかんないのら。
Remy,
タクに手を出さないで。
brought her hands together around the streaming rays of light. The air shook around us. Shining feathers of light appeared out from nowhere and began to dance around Remy. And in her hands I saw... Senna had brought down her huge D-sword down with full force, but she easily blocked it.
タクを追い詰めないで。
The thing in her hands was far too elegant, far too holy to be called a sword. It was like the wings of an angel. And then I understood. She, Remy Sakihata, was also a giglomaniac. Senna Aoi was looking at her in sheer astonishment. The winged sword that had so easily blocked her own weapon was clearly a D-sword, and if she hadn't used it many times before, she wouldn't have been able to block Senna's attack so easily.
先畑さんもギガロマニアックスだったのら。
Kosubi was looking down at them from the top of the shipping container, as if she was a spectator watching a game. Her legs were dangling off the side. Senna was more than a little annoyed at her behavior, considering how she'd just ruined her surprise attack. But her gaze was locked on her front, on Remy. Remy's expression was pained. Takumi Nishijo was lying on the ground behind her, moaning in shock. Senna was only after him. She wasn't here to fight Remy. This wasn't a manga or anime. It wasn't realistic at all to try and fight someone with a D-sword.
その男が何をしたか知っているのか ?IR2 という公式を。
知ってるよ。
Senna, she cut Senna off. Her answer was calm and sad, but clearly spoken. When she heard this, Senna's grip on her blade tightened even further.
それなら
タクを覚醒させれば、もっと大変なことになる。
その前に殺す。
あなたには無理だよ。
Senna decided it wasn't worth trying to talk anymore. She brought her weapon lower, ready to strike with it. Rimi, however, was simply standing there. With long strides, she could be there in 5 steps. 3 seconds would be all it took. Senna didn't hesitate. She charged straight at Rimi. She slashed with her D-sword. Rimi tried to block it, just as she did before. But Senna's attack was a feint. The blade passed through Rimi's sword and her body. She'd cancelled the real boot. Right now, Senna's D-sword was just a delusion. It couldn't touch anything. It couldn't cut anything. It couldn't kill anyone. But that was just what Senna wanted. Rimi had been ready to block the blade and was caught off guard for an instant. By the time she figured out what happened, Senna had already slipped past her and was about 2 steps away from Takumi. It only took an instant to do another real boot. Now. Takumi's terror-stricken eyes were pointed straight at Senna. It made the real boot easy. The D-sword, now real again, was only inches from piercing Takumi's heart.
Senna.
She saw someone in the corner of her vision. When she heard the voice, it stirred violent emotions within her. Her aim missed. And the blade only grazed Takumi's leg before slamming into the concrete next to him. Senna slowly looked up. And gasped. A man was standing at the edge of the roof, the sun setting behind him, his countenance like a ghost. His face was pale and ashen. His eyes were bloodshot and sunk deep into his head. His head was slumped forward and expressionless. When she saw him, Senna stopped caring about Takumi at all. It was then the man Senna had chased. It was the man Senna had chased for so long, the man she hated, the man who'd abandoned her and betrayed her family. And now he was right in front of her.
ようやく見つけた。
Senna took a step towards him. She gritted her teeth to keep the hate welling up within her from taking control. She readied her D-sword again. She took another step.
どうしようもなかった。私はお前の母さんを生贄に捧げるしかなかったんだ。
黙れ。
母さんの最後はとても安らかなものだったよ。だからセナ、安心してほしい。母さんのおかげで素晴らしい実験結果が出た。母さんは世界のために役立ったんだ。お前も母さんの功績を誇っていい。
黙れよ。
The blood rushed to Senna's head. The man was now all she could see. She ran. She got there in an instant. Senna closed the distance between them in the blink of an eye, and when she was close enough, stabbed the D-sword deep into his body. This had been Senna's most fervent wish. She spent every day wandering Shibuya, just so she could someday kill him. She dreamed of killing him almost every night.
やっと母さんの仇を。
She tried to pull out the sword. She tried to back away from him. But the sword wouldn't come out. The man fell forward and embraced her.
よせ、気安く触るな。
All the hairs on her body stood up in revulsion. It was far too late for this. The bond between Senna and her father had long since been cut. But for some reason she was shocked to find that she couldn't push him away. His warmth, his big broad shoulders, or his big broad chest, the reality of having her father here, right in front of her. Senna's hands were turning red.
私は こんなの。
お
あなた
前
が
が望んだ妄想だ。
望んだ妄想だよ。
She heard whispering, and then she knew. Errors slipped into dead spots. Psychic attacks. Illusions. Her delusions had been read. By the time she realized what had happened, it was too late. She'd lost her balance. Both her and the man fell off the edge of the roof. The ground, 8 stories beneath her, seemed so far away. All I could do was watch without understanding at all what was going on. Senna suddenly ran towards the edge of the roof and then, for no reason, lost her balance and began to fall. Her body was just about to disappear off the edge.
落ちる。
All I could do was whisper. I closed my eyes tightly. Suicide. Senna was going to kill herself by throwing herself off the roof. I didn't know why. I didn't want to know. She'd attacked me for no reason, and now she'd been punished. She turned out to be an enemy, too. But no matter how much I waited, I didn't hear the sound of her hitting the ground. Nervously, I opened my eyes to see what was going on. Senna hadn't fallen. She was slumped over. And Rimi was right next to her. Rimi was holding onto her arm. Had Rimi saved her? Senna had thrown away her D-sword and was crying like a little girl. What had just happened? As near as I could tell, Senna had just tried to kill herself.
辛い思いさせてごめんね。でもしょうがなかったの。
What had Rimi done to Senna? She was like a totally different person than the cheerful Rimi I knew. Her face was pained, her voice was sad, there were tears in her eyes. The girl in front of me wasn't the Rimi I knew. I heard a voice in my mind. Kosupi was still watching us from the top of the shipping crate.
もう終了だよね。もしもセナさんのことぐしゃばきってしようとしてるならコズピ許さないぽん。崎畑さんのことバラバラにしちゃうよ。
A cold chill ran down my spine. Kosupi was still using her cheerful anime voice, but I could tell she was serious.
もう終わり。もともと葵さんのことどうこうするつもりはないし、タクの前から消えてくれるならこのまま解放する。それは無理。だってコズピーとセナちゃんとタクミちゃんはお友達だもん。ね、そうでしょタクミちゃん。
I couldn't think about anything else. If you told me everything that just happened was a dream, I'm sure I would have believed it. Why had Senna attacked me anyway? Was Senna my enemy after all?
お前のせいだ。
Senna looked up at me, her face filled with tears. She was still slumped over, and she hadn't even tried to wipe away the tears. She was staring at me with anger in her eyes.
お前のせいで私の家族は。
I was confused. I could feel her raw emotions. But what had I done? I'd never bothered anybody. I didn't even know Senna's family. I was completely harmless.
無害だと。
She'd read my mind.
お前が生み出したものが世界を滅ぼすかもしれないっていうのに。
Destroy the world? Was she just another crazy person who'd read too much manga? I turned to Rimi for help, but Rimi had her back to me and was looking out towards the evening sky.
無駄だよ。
The way she looked, her voice, was it just me, or did she seem so very, very sad?
タクは何も知らないから。
But it sounded like Rimi knew everything.
ふざけるな。今渋谷を襲っている混乱は全部あの公式が発端なんだぞ。
Formula?
それ以上言わないで。タクは、本当に何も知らないの。
It felt like they were talking about me, but I couldn't follow the conversation at all.
公式って、これのこと
Kuzubi came down from her perch on the shipping crate, carrying my essay. On the back of it were the scribbles I'd done as a boy. IR2. This was the cause of everything that was happening in Shibuya? Ridiculous. How could a bunch of scribbles on paper have that kind of power? I'd just drawn them to kill some time, I think. It was so long ago, I couldn't really remember, but they didn't mean anything at all. I'd just written down the numbers I'd seen in my dream. It was a dream that had something to do with the subject of my essay. Whose eyes were those? I'd used that phrase for a long time, and then one day I'd start to see it more and more clearly in my dreams. And in those dreams, I'd seen the numbers.
FUN の10乗かける INT の40乗イコール IR2。
Senna finally wiped away her tears. Her eyes were red. She kept talking, still slumped on the ground, looking at me with anger and frustration in her eyes.
この公式をお前が生み出した瞬間、世界は分岐したんだ。
Huh?
ノア2に搭載されている中で最も秀でているのは、中核システムに組み込まれたとある方程式です。これは人類史上、未だ回答が見つかっていないとされているもの。
ミレニアム7のうちの一つかね。
億単位の懸賞金がかけられているという数学界で未だ未解決の7つの問題か。
いいえ、その7つの中には入っていません。ですが、実はミレニアム7はもともと問題が8つあった。公開前に1つだけ削除されたのです。
それがノア2に組み込まれている方程式だと。
削除された理由は？
世界に最悪をまき散らす可能性があるためというところです。
一体どのような数式なのだ？
基本相互作用における電磁気力を想定した共鳴現象、それを表す計算式です。これにより特定の電磁パルスと受容体とが近接作用することで発現する未知の力が解明されました。各国が30年以上かけて開発し積み上げてきた沈黙の兵器の研究成果を一瞬にして過去のものとしてしまったんですよ。
その問題に回答を見つけた者は神になるに等しいというわけだ。
それを君が果たしたというわけかね。
それはとても不思議な場所から見つかりました。子供の落書きというね。IR2 ノア2のいわゆるハードウェア部分はこの公式によって神に匹敵する能力を手に入れました。あとはソフトウェア部分に相当するギガロマニアックスのコードサンプルを集めればノア2は本格的に稼働し我々の望むもの全てを実現してくれるでしょう。
かのアインシュタインが現代に生きていればと思うよ。彼は高い能力を持つギガロマニアックスだったと聞く。
家庭の話よりも現状がどうなっているかだ。ギガロマニアックスは世界中に数えるほどしかいないというではないか。大丈夫なのか？
すでに5人分のサンプルは確保しました。
ノア2稼働に十分な数は集まったようだね。
ならば結構。
ただサンプルが多ければ多いほどノア2の能力は向上します。特にどうしてもサンプルを採取したいギガロマニアックスの少年が一人いましてね。
だからといって計画の遅延は許されんぞ。
ノア2の本格稼働はいつ頃になりそうなのかね。
稼働前に最終実験としてサードメルトを行います。
また地震を起こそうと？
予測規模は？
想定では関東大震災と同レベル。
関東大震災クラスだと？
マグニチュード 7.9 だったかな。
現在の建築基準と免震対策レベルを考えれば町にかつてほどの大きな損害を及ぼすことはないでしょ
だが犠牲者の数はファーストセカンドの比ではなかろ
う。およそ5000人ほどといったところです。少なく見積もってですが。問題が？
責任は貴様が取るのだろうな。
腹でも切って死んでみせますか？これが最終実験です。サードメルトが予定通りの成果を上げた時、ノア2は完全なる完成を見る。世界の可能性は我らの手の中に。
この公式をお前が生み出した瞬間、世界は分岐したんだ。
分岐って。
Wait, this isn't an H game.
タク、もう行こう。話聞く必要なんてないよ。
Rimi grabbed me by the hand and tried to pull me into the room. I could sense her desperation. She was afraid of something.
葵さんが言ってることは全部嘘っぱちだし。
嘘はそっちだろ。
葵さん、もう帰って。タクの前から消えてよ。
Who was I supposed to believe?
たかが数式になんでそんなに目くじら立てるんだよ。
本当に何も分かってないのか。アインシュタインが唱えた E=MC の事情、これが発表されたことで核兵器が開発されるという未来が生まれたように、お前の生み出した IR2 もまた E=MC の事情と同じ、いやそれ以上の影響力を世界に与えている。 IR2 は沈黙の兵器を現実のものとした。
沈黙の兵器？
思考盗撮、視覚投影、五感制御。
Those were the technologies that Senna had told me about before, the ones in the patent.
ギガロマニアックスは特別。いや、異常ではなくなる。これからはこの忌々しい力を誰もが自由に使えるようになるんだ。 IR2 を元に作られた装置によってな。もっとも、その前に一握りの腐った連中に独占され、人々は気づかないうちに家畜同然の立場になるよう洗脳されてしまうだろうが。
I didn't know anything about any of this. I had no idea. Even if what Senna said was true, I'd never meant to make anything like that. I was just a kid, scribbling on paper. I hadn't done anything wrong.
そのアイアーム2は
IR2、
それはギガロマニアックスの力のことをキュッピーンって説明したものなんだ。やっぱりあのおじさんが言ってたのは本当だったのら。一番重要なのはその目、誰の目を生み出した少年なんだって。それってたくみちゃんのことだったんだね。
Kozapi's voice was cheerful, but it wasn't as innocent and pure as she was. Rimi said nothing. But Senna, her eyes were wide. Suddenly, I looked up and staggered to her feet. Why did she seem like she was having trouble walking? Was it because of whatever Rimi had done to her?
小杖。お前、今なんて言った？
Senna began to storm toward a stunned Kozupi.
おじしゃんって誰のことだ？
ほんとね、コズピーに理想度の大切さを教えてくれた人。東京に来て初めて話した人なの。なんかね、ふぎゅーって鼻つまみたくなっちゃう格好してて、へんてこなこと書いた板持ってたの。世界は終わるとかとか。
なんでそれを早く言わなかった？
そんなこと言われても。
あいつだ。やっと見つけた。
Neither me nor Rimi nor Kozupi had any idea what she was talking about. All we could do was watch as an intense fury descended on her.
私はやっとあいつを殺せる。
An experiment had been performed, but she never knew. Alright, why don't we stop it there? This is audap. You've been watching Chaos Head Noah running on Nintendo Switch. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.